They're uncomfortable. Right? I mean, Jesus was just like us, and I just wonder sometimes, at what point did Jesus become uncomfortable? But it didn't make a difference. He still did the things that were uncomfortable. He still did the things that were risks. And there's a lot to consider when those things happen.
Hello, church family. Welcome to the Tulip Church podcast. You are about to listen to one of our teachings that was given on a Sunday morning here at our church. If the Lord speaks to you through today's teaching, please share with a friend and follow so that you don't miss anything in the future. We pray that you enjoy today's message and that you are brought closer to the Father as a result.
If you have your Bibles, you're going to want to turn to Matthew chapter 8. I referenced Matthew chapter 8 last week, and as I was preparing for this one, I was like, isn't there another? No, we need to go to Matthew 8. So just go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 8. Last week, I began looking at, and I've been looking at this for a while, but we began talking about the moments of Jesus' ministry when he risked becoming unclean. There's times when he reached into those lives that everybody thought were the untouchables, the unclean people, and how it didn't matter to him. And the more I studied this idea, the clearer it becomes to me that Jesus was more concerned with the people he impacted than his own reputation or his own welfare. And in some ways you're going, well, that's obvious. Right? That's just who Jesus was. But again, if our goal is to become more like Jesus, then we're going to have to learn at some point that what we do and the things that the Lord sends us to, the places where he sends us to, are more about the people that we are supposed to impact than our own reputation and our own welfare. And there are far too many times that takes, for us, I think it's our personalities most of the time. It's just human for us to go, that's pretty important. I don't want to sully my reputation. I don't want want people to think poorly of me, those kind of things. But when you look at what Jesus was doing, he could care less. Again, I feel like this is worth exploring further since our goal is always to be more like Jesus in everything we do and say. So, Matthew chapter 8. I'm going to read through these first 15 verses. I know that might seem like a lot, but there's these three stories that are really important. So, beginning at verse 1 of chapter 8. He says, when he came down from the mountain, recognize this, large crowds followed him. Right away, a man with leprosy came up and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Reaching out his hand, Jesus touched him, saying, I am willing, be made clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Then Jesus told him, see that you don't tell anyone, but go and show yourself to the priests and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Next story. When he entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him. Lord, my servant is lying at home, paralyzed in terrible agony. He said to him, am I to come and heal him? Lord, the centurion replied, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, having soldiers under my command. I say to this one, go, and he goes. To another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. Hearing this, Jesus was amazed and said to those following him, truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with so great a faith. I tell you that many will come from east and west to share the banquet with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then Jesus told the centurion, go. As you have believed, let it be done for you. And his servant was healed at that very moment. Story number 3. Jesus went into Peter's house and saw his mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. So he touched her, and the fever left her. Then she got up and began to serve him. May God bless the reading of his word this morning. I just want to highlight these stories this morning. So verses 1 through 4, we have the story of the leper. And again, we talked about this a little bit last week, but we need to remember the results of those that had leprosy in that day and age. Right? What were the ramifications of it? What happened if you had it, right? Actually, it was referred to, if I understand it correctly, it was referred to as living death. If you had leprosy, you had living death. Because you were forced to leave everything behind. You were forced to live in isolation in a camp away from the rest of the town, away from the rest of the people. Yes, there might be others living there that had leprosy as well. But if you were around any people, that was it. You were around other lepers. You weren't to be around anybody else. So you were isolated. You were separated from your family. You were sent out. Right? If by chance you happened to have to go someplace, or there were others who happened to stumble into your vicinity, you had to immediately begin to say, unclean. I am unclean. So that they would know that they should not be around you. So imagine you're just walking, out in the middle of nowhere, and somebody else comes up, and it's your responsibility to begin to say, unclean. Unclean. I'm unclean. So that they wouldn't come around you. You couldn't go to the temple, which meant that you weren't able to go and worship. You weren't able to go and be a part of that spiritual community. You weren't able to go. You weren't able to go and offer your sacrifices, right? Which especially for the Israelite people, for the Jewish people, that was their connection to God. So you were not only isolated from your family and from the town, from your community, you were isolated from God as well. You had a loss of jobs because you couldn't do it. You had a loss of income, so you were forced to rely on charity. And for men, for the head of the household, it meant that your family became destitute as well. There were just a lot of ramifications that came from having leprosy. And the other thing is, not only were those physical things, but there was also this stigma that came along with it, because most of them believed at that point in time that if you had leprosy, it was the result of some sin that you had committed, or that your parents or somebody had committed along the way. It was a judgment for something that you had done or something that you were. So you were unclean physically, and you were unclean spiritually. You were just unclean all around if you were a leper. So lepers were untouchables. They were untouchables. So imagine that you have this disease that keeps you from human contact, right? And then suddenly, right, even though you're not supposed to be around people, then there's this crowd of people around this one man that you hear, this is a man that can make a difference in your life. Jesus has healing power. And so all of a sudden you have hope. This man comes along, and you have suddenly somebody who offers you something, who has something that you want. And Jesus reaches out and touches you. You haven't been touched because they weren't allowed. And suddenly Jesus reaches out and touches the untouchable. He looks past the visible infection, right? He sees beyond the social and the financial and the spiritual emptiness that comes along with all this. And he says, you know what you need? Even though it's not what I'm supposed to do, even though it's what society says I'm not supposed to do, you know what you need? You need to be touched. I don't know, just reaches out and puts a hand on his forearm or on his shoulder or whatever, but he reaches out and he heals him. Jesus touches and heals the one that society pretends did not exist or tries to make non-existent. Jesus touches the untouchables. That's the first story. Here's the second story. Right? Verses 5 through 13. It's about a Roman soldier. Roman soldiers were Gentiles. And not only were they Gentiles, which was one strike against them, especially in Jerusalem, around that area, or anywhere around where Jesus was going, like that's a strike against them. But he was a Roman soldier, the very symbol of oppression to the Hebrew people. Right? Soldiers could command citizens to carry their stuff for them. Soldiers could command citizens, just normal citizens, to do whatever they wanted them to do. In fact, you go back to Matthew chapter 6, when we talked a while back, right? We talked about, going the extra mile. And when Jesus says, when somebody tells you to carry their stuff for 1 mile, you go 2. That's who he was talking about. It was the Roman soldiers that had the authority to come to you and to say, I'm tired of carrying my stuff. I don't care which direction you're going. You're going the direction I'm going now, and you're going to carry this. And the rule was that you had to carry it for 1 mile. And so Jesus says, don't worry about the 1 mile rule. Go 2 miles, right? Go the extra mile. Soldiers were hated, absolutely hated, despised by the people around him. And it was doubly humiliating because here they were, right? These Roman soldiers, these Gentiles walking around in this community that was an Israelite community, and he's walking around there, and the Israelites are the children of God. How humiliating for the children of God to have to be obedient to somebody who's not even a child of God, who's a Gentile. It was awful. It was beyond humiliating. It was disgusting. The Romans had no respect for Jewish laws or sacred artifacts, right? These were pagans among God's chosen people. And as we talked about last week, all the Gentiles, any person who was not an Israelite, to an Israelite, was unclean. They were unclean. So if you came into contact with them, you had to go through the whole ritual of trying to figure out, how do we become clean again? And it's taken care of, again, back in the Old Testament. These are the things that you need to do. Roman soldiers were on the outside of the acceptable circle. They were outside of it. So again, imagine this. Jesus is being followed by a large crowd, right? That's what 8:1 says. He came down from the mountain, and large crowds followed him everywhere he went. Right, so there's this large crowd around Jesus, and he's being followed by this group, and most of the crowd is made up, again, of these Jewish people looking for a sign, right, looking for these opportunities. And first he gets interrupted by this leper, which the people are like, these people just need to go away and leave him alone so that he can take care of us. That's what they're thinking. I'm 100% positive of that. That's what they're thinking, right? But this leper comes in and takes care of it. And now we've got this Roman soldier who comes in. This centurion approaches him. And people give the centurion space because, one, he's unclean, and so we don't want to be around him, right? So as he's walking through, the crowd kind of splits, I'm sure, not just because of his armor, but also because he's unclean. So the crowd kind of splits, and he approaches Jesus, right? So they don't want to get into, trouble with the religious leaders and have to go through all that rigmarole in order to become clean again. But also, they're enemies, and they don't want trouble with the Romans. So they're just giving him this path to get to Jesus. But Jesus doesn't avoid him. Instead, Jesus stands his ground, and the soldier approaches him and makes a request. And Jesus interacts with the soldier. And I can see it, right? These people that are around him and watching all this take place, right? Of all the people in need of help, of all the folks of Jewish ancestry with proximity to Jesus right now, Jesus gives time to the one who is the outsider instead of those that are gathered around him. Instead of those that are worthy, Jesus chooses the one that's the outsider. Not only that, but humiliation of humiliations. Right? Truly, I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with so great a faith. Man, that statement right there would have been almost enough for people to start to pick up rocks. But that's what he says. Jesus gives time to the one who's considered an outsider. Then we come to this story in verses 14 and 15. Peter's mother-in-law, right? She's an elderly woman. A couple weeks ago, Mark Thomas was speaking, and he told us a few weeks ago that Luke is the gospel about seeing. Right? There's a lot of stuff in Luke about seeing, about being seen, about recognizing, about those things. But listen to what happens right here, because that just reminded me of that. It says, Jesus went into Peter's house and saw his mother-in-law. Jesus saw her. That's quite a statement. Jesus noticed her and noticed her need. Now listen, again, there's a cultural thing that we need to understand, and we've talked about it before, but men just didn't interact with women in that day and age. It just didn't happen. Right? Couple of reasons. One, ladies, sorry, don't take offense. Women were second class. Right? They were possessions to be owned, more or less. Right? And so you just didn't notice them. And men didn't notice. Right? You weren't supposed to. It was inappropriate. The second thing is it was inappropriate, especially if the woman was married or a widow or that kind of stuff. Right? It was inappropriate for a man to have an interaction with a woman at that point in time. And Scripture tells us that she had been sick. It doesn't tell us with what, but you could go back to the list about lepers, right, of contagious things at that point in time and how they were to avoid those things. And many of those, because of illnesses, many of those things applied here as well. Peter's mother-in-law was invisible. She was invisible. Many of the women were. Actually, we don't even know why they went to her house. Maybe they were just tired, right? A long day with a lot of people, and it was the closest house that they had a connection to, right? And Peter, I can see this, right? Peter just, being who Peter is, just invites everyone to the house. Like, I know where we can go. We can go to my mother-in-law's house. It's close. She'll take care of us. It's like, and he's not even remembering or thinking about the fact that she's been sick. Can't even do anything, right? But that's Peter, right? That's like the rest of us. It's like, whatever, we'll get, we'll figure that out when we get there. But that's where they're at. I suppose it really doesn't matter why, just where they went. But if you look at verse 15, Jesus, seeing her condition, touched her hand. He reaches out and heals the one that society wanted to make unnoticed, that society wanted to keep invisible. That's a lot of stuff, right? The leper, the Roman, the elderly woman, they represent the marginalized. And I love the fact that those three stories are right there all together in one spot, connected together. And I think there's a reason for that. It's because, again, we need to recognize that there were these marginalized people, there were these untouchables, these unlovables, that Jesus says that is not the case anymore. In 15 short verses, Jesus is exposed to what we would consider to be, or what they consider to be, the least. And he does not shy away from it. He comes into proximity of those that they would have said, these are the most unclean of the unclean. And instead of turning away, he embraces. I'm not sure I can find comparisons for us, but I think we need to try. I think I need to try. So you can think of your own on these ideas. But for us, for our culture, for our society, for our community, who are the lepers? Who are the ones that we try to isolate and keep off to themselves, that we think need to be separated from the rest of us? Who are the people that we see their situation as contagious? Right? We're afraid if we're in their proximity, we'll catch what they have. And so we keep them, at the very minimum, arm's length. Right? But in reality, it's probably one of those things of we wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. Right? Let's keep them far away. Who are the untouchables? I have some that I think. I'm just wrestling with whether I want to tell you what they are or not. But I will. I think for the longest time, again, and with my apologies to my brothers that are here, I think for the longest time, and we still do to some degree, addicts. It's like, listen, until you get cleaned up, you guys stay over there. You all stay over there. And we'll be over here. And we'll be here when you get cleaned up. But we keep them at arm's length. I think we do the same with the homeless. We don't know what to do with them. How do we help? Is it helpful to give them money? Is it not helpful to give them money? Is it helpful to give food? It's not helpful. What do we do with the homeless? I don't know. And so because we don't know, we keep them at arm's length. Right? They're the untouchables. They're also the ones like, yeah, but I'm just one paycheck away from being exactly like you, and so if I give you mine, then how am I not going to? It's just hard for us. I think we do the same thing with those. Sometimes we do that with mental illness. We're not sure what to do with those folks. We're not sure how to interact with them, so we leave them to the professionals. I don't know that that's the right thing. I think we do the same thing with people who make choices about different lifestyles that we may or may not agree with. It's just like let's just separate them. There'll be some place for them. There'll be somebody who will take them. So we put them in the category of untouchables. They're kind of like the lepers to us. Anybody else uncomfortable right now? Anybody? And I come to the Roman centurion, right? Who are the Roman centurions? These are the people that we see, and it's like, and we get so angry with them because we see them abuse power, because it's like they think that they're better than what they are. Or maybe we just look at ourselves and go, well, why should they be any better? Right? So we see them with an abuse of power, and because of that, we don't trust them. I want to, but because you do these things, I can't trust you. Or because you're this way, I can't trust you. They're the ones outside of our circle of acceptability. They're the ones that just like they don't fit with us. They don't. It just doesn't mesh with who we are. Who are they? Well, right now, officials and officers of Iran and other enemy countries that we have, right? These are the Roman soldiers. These are the centurions to us, where it's like, hey, I can't trust you. I can't believe a word you're saying. I don't think you're in this for the right reasons. I think you're going to abuse the power. I think you're going to do all these things, and therefore we are not going to accept who you are, and we're going to keep you not only at arm's length, we're going to keep you at missile length. right? ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all those things, whatever you want to fill in there right now. Closer to home, I've told you before, I'm about the least political person that you ever want to meet. So just keep that in mind as I say these things. But certain political figures we put into this category of I don't trust you. I think you just are out here for the power. I don't think that you're making decisions that are good for everybody else. I think you only want decisions that are good for yourself. And because of that, you're going to be outside of this circle that I can trust, right? So we've got politicians or political parties. We've got certain branches of law enforcement that people right now don't trust. I mean, this list could go on and on of who the Roman centurions are in our world right now. They're outside of our circle of acceptability. They're unclean. We don't want to have anything to do with them. And then there's Peter's mother-in-law. Who are these people, right? I mean, people where being invisible is a part of the job. And because it's part of the job, they're emotionally exhausted. They're physically exhausted. They're burned out. They're the invisible people. And I was just trying to think of that. And it's those who work behind the scenes. I mean, when I was working at the school, and I would pass by one of the janitors. For the longest time, it's like they're the invisible. They're the ones that you never really see, but they're the ones that keep everything going. Right? People behind the counters at fast food restaurants. These are the Peter's mother-in-law type of people, right? They're the ones that it's like, man, sorry you have to work this job. I'm grateful that you work this job, but I really don't want to have anything to do with you. The nurses, the orderlies, those folks that are just always behind the scenes, the invisible ones. So Jesus comes along and he touches the untouchables. He includes those that are on the outside of the circle. He sees the invisible. And he reaches out to them with compassion and grace and love. And as you read this, you need to understand those are risks. Jesus took risks in those things. They're uncomfortable. Right? I mean, Jesus was just like us, and I just wonder sometimes, at what point did Jesus become uncomfortable? But it didn't make a difference. He still did the things that were uncomfortable. He still did the things that were risks. And there's a lot to consider when those things happen, right? If we begin to do this, if you begin to touch the untouchable, and if you begin to include those on the outside, if you begin to reach into the places where the unclean people live and where they are and what they do and all those kind of things, our thought process is this: what are the other people going to think about me? What are the other people in the church going to think about me? I mean, there's a part of me that's like, it can go one way or the other, right? What? I don't know if I want to pick on one or not, but I'm going to, right? Tomorrow evening, right? By the way, there's a thing at school I have to do. But after that's done, I decide I'm going to Aggies. One of two things is going to happen. Y'all are going to go out and go, hey, our pastor goes to Aggies. Or you're all going to go out and you're going to go, oh, our pastor goes to Aggies. Right? There's a risk. You don't even know what I'm going to do there, but it doesn't matter to you. All you know is that's where I'm at. I don't know. That's awfully unclean. I don't know, I've never been in, so I can't tell if it's clean or unclean or not anyway. But that's a whole different issue. But, right, so what are the people in the church going to think about it? And that, I hate to say it, but it oftentimes squelches our desire or our actual reaching out into those unclean places because we're worried about what other people are going to think. And I can guarantee if I were to walk into Aggie, I would be uncomfortable. I bet they would too. It's a risk. And what if people, so what will people think of us? But you've also got to say, what if people mistake our love for agreement or acceptance? What if they mistake that? What if they think my reaching out into certain circles is going to cause me to, it means that I agree with them? Does love mean that sinful actions no longer exist or matter? No. No, sinful actions still have repercussions. It does. But if I look at the actions and the teaching of Jesus, then not taking the risk in reaching out and loving could be sinful as well. Jesus called us to love. And I know it says love each other, and we do, right? Love your brothers and sisters, love one another. I get that. But he also called us to love, right? Our enemies. He called us to love. He called to pray for our enemies and acknowledge that and have that capacity to have a relationship, right? So, but how many of us don't want to have anything to do with Jesus, or not us? How many people outside of the church? I mean, I keep running into people all the time that kind of say, you know what? I would really be interested in this Jesus thing if I knew some Christians that really acted like Jesus, that really loved like Jesus, that really taught like he taught, that really did the things that he did, right? Because those who profess to follow him are the most judgmental, and those who are watching from the outside don't want to catch what we have because they don't want to be that judgmental. Kind of weird, huh? So what side do you want to err on? Is it more important for you to know that people know they are loved, or is it more important for them to know that they're sinners? And when I look at Jesus touching the untouchable and seeing the invisible and reaching out to the people that are outside of the circle of where they would normally run, that were the clean or unclean circles, I just get this impression that he was more interested in helping them know that they were loved than that they were sinners. Listen, you can deal with both. But again, looking at Jesus, I'm fairly certain that the love of Jesus showed was that the starting point of dealing with sin was love, and not the other way around. When he encountered the woman at the well, again, unclean, broke all kinds of rules there, right? John chapter 4, broke all kinds of rules, right? When he told her about his life, about her life. He showed her that he loved her. He did all those kind of things, and then she went and she shared it with everybody. When he encountered the woman who was caught in adultery, again, broke all kinds of rules, right? When he lifted her up, he said, I don't accuse you either. Then now go and sin no more. But to go and sin no more had a whole lot more emphasis, a whole lot more power behind it, because he'd already showed her how he loved her. Because he reached out. Because he touched the leper, because he saw the Roman centurion, because he did. So I would like to offer what could be considered a radical perspective on clean and unclean before we close today. Here it is. Jesus doesn't call us to be clean. In fact, it actually seems like the opposite. He calls us to be among the unclean, which by association makes us unclean. Again, we talked about that last week, that that Jesus hung out with so many of those people that he would have been considered to be unclean by so many of the religious leaders. In fact, even by the law of Moses, he would have been considered to be unclean. So he calls us to be among the unclean, which by association makes us unclean. Now, get this, though. He doesn't tell us to stay there. He tells us that his righteousness is sufficient for us and that he washes us white as snow. We read that at the beginning. So hanging out with the unclean doesn't make you unclean. It just tells us where we ought to be. So go to the unclean. Get dirty. Take their uncleanliness on yourself and then take it to Jesus and let him make it white as snow. Show them how he makes everything new and fresh and clean. Go to the untouchable. Look for those outside of the circles. And see the invisible. And don't be afraid. Father, I thank you.
We hope that your life was enriched by today's word. If so, leave us a comment and let us know what stuck out to you today. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of our new content. Have a blessed day.